Today on Bench Briefs, we're looking at a significant case from the federal court that grapples with the intersection of immigration law and constitutional rights. Ibrahim v. Canada, Citizenship and Immigration, 2026 FC 500. This case raises important questions about how far Canada's Charter of Rights and Freedoms protects permanent residents facing removal on criminal grounds. Here's the story. Ibrahim is a permanent resident of Canada. At some point, Citizenship and Immigration Canada initiated removal proceedings against him. The government's basis for removal? Allegations that Ibrahim was involved in criminal conduct. Faced with the threat of being forced to leave the country he calls home, Ibrahim challenged the removal order. But he didn't just argue the facts of the criminal allegations. He argued that removing him would violate his constitutional rights under the Charter, specifically his rights to life, liberty, and security of the person. So what was at stake here? First, Ibrahim claimed that deporting him would infringe on these fundamental rights guaranteed by the Charter. If the government forces someone out of Canada, especially on the basis of alleged criminal conduct, does that violate their right to life, liberty, and security? And if it does, can the government justify that infringement under Section 1 of the Charter, which allows certain rights to be limited if the limits are reasonable and demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society? At its core, the case forced the court to consider a few big legal questions. 1. Does the Charter protect permanent residents from removal on the basis of criminal allegations? 2. If it does, can the government's interest in removing potentially dangerous individuals outweigh those constitutional protections? And 3, how broadly should constitutional rights apply in immigration proceedings, which often balance national security, public safety, and individual rights? The federal court had to dig into these thorny issues. Permanent residents, unlike Canadian citizens, don't have an automatic right to remain in Canada, but they do have significant ties here. The question was whether those ties and their charter rights should shield them from removal when criminal conduct is alleged. The government argued that immigration laws and removal powers are essential tools to protect the public and maintain the integrity of Canada's borders. The court's analysis focused on balancing these interests. It looked at whether removal on the basis of alleged criminal conduct actually infringes on the rights to life, liberty, and security of the person. For example, removal could put a person's safety at risk if they face harm in their country of origin, which touches on the right to life and security. It could also deprive them of liberty by forcibly removing them from their established life in Canada. But even if there is an infringement, the court then examined whether that infringement can be justified under Section 1 of the Charter. This means the government must prove that the removal is a reasonable limit, carefully tailored to serve an important objective, like protecting public safety, and that no less intrusive means are available. Why does this case matter beyond just Ibrahim? It highlights the evolving nature of constitutional protections for permanent residents. It challenges us to think about how Canada balances individual rights against the state's interest in controlling immigration and protecting society. It also sets a precedent for how courts might approach similar cases where permanent residents face removal based on criminal allegations, particularly when those allegations raise questions about personal safety and fundamental rights. In a broader sense, Ibrahim v. Canada invites ongoing reflection about who counts as part of the Canadian community deserving of constitutional protection, and how those protections play out in the complex, often high-stakes world of immigration law. It reminds us that immigration decisions aren't just administrative. They can have profound impacts on a person's life, liberty, and security. Thanks for listening to this episode of Bench Briefs. Join us next time as we break down another important legal decision shaping Canada's justice landscape. Until then, take care.